week. So in today's video we're going to cover a little bit about encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism and abstraction in Java. Now sorry about that. The reason why I want to cover this is actually really simple. It's another part of this. Now I want to mention this is the last video in this series, presumably, because I already taught you the basics and I'm planning on teaching myself SQL, PHP, ASP, which is what I really want to learn, ASP.NET to be specific, Node.js, another one, but we're going to cover JavaScript in the next one because JavaScript seems to be, for me, a bit simpler to explain everything compared to everything else. So we'll be covering JavaScript in the next series. I'll be trying to, teach you JavaScript, why you may want to use it and stuff. I use JavaScript personally on my website as well. I use it, well, not that heavily, but I do use it in fact. In fact, we can look up the repository right now. So we can go to my GitHub page and we can go to my website. As you can see, it says mostly HTML, but there is a bit of JavaScript involved. As you can see, oh, you cannot see it at all. That's a bummer. Actually, there we go. So if I scroll down, you can see there's a bit of JavaScript involved, but a tiny bit. Before it was just purely JavaScript. A pretty good example of where you would use JavaScript is, in fact, for example, in a chatbot. So I have my minimalist chatbot here, and I'm not sure if you can see that. It's mainly used about 52% of it. So it's another way of using JavaScript and learning how to use it. Anyway, that was just a side note. So back to regular Java then. So as I mentioned, we're going to cover encapsulation first. So what is encapsulation? Encapsulation is a way of basically hiding data from users. It's really important if you want to hide certain pieces of data you don't want anyone to see. So for example, we can declare class variables as private, and we can provide a public get and set method to access or update these private bits of data or private variables. I'll show you what I mean by that. So as an example, I'm going to keep this as my class, because why not? And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a private string inside of here. Private string, we're going to call it name, for example. Which means that it has restricted access as of now, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a get to get the name that we need. To do that, we simply type in public string get name, and what we have to do is we have to put in these brackets. And to create some sort of a code block, and we want to return the name of the person. So that's how you get the name. And I'm going to create a void which will set the name accordingly. So to do that, we're going to create or write public void set name. Again, the regular brackets, and then these brackets to create a code block. And inside of these brackets, these regular ones, we're going to type in string new name, for example. And now what we want to do is we want to get the name, so we're going to use this dot name will equal new name, because we want to basically set the value of our new name variable according to the name variable inside of this, which is a private string. So pretty much what we have is we have created a get method which returns the value of name. Then we have a set method with a parameter, a string parameter called new name, and it assigns the name variable. And this keyword, like this thing right here, the this.name, it basically references the current object that is used for it. However, we cannot in fact access the name like on its own because it's a private variable, so we cannot access it outside of this class, which will cause issues with our code. If we want to use it, since it's a private method, we need to use the setName and getName things. So here's how we would do it. We go into this main section of our code, and what we are going to do is we're going to create an instance of our class. Once again, for example, we're going to, since this is I think it's a my class, isn't it? Yes, it's my class. We're going to type in my class, and let's name it person. And I'm going to type in a equals new, and so anyway, it was a little bit of intervention. So we're currently creating an instance of our class called my class, and it will be which is my class, and it will be called person, and we want to create a new instance of it. So we type in new and then my class to make it functional with our current bit of code. And now what do we want to do? So now we want to use the setter that we've created, or otherwise known as the setName void we've created, and it takes a parameter. The parameter that we are using is the new name parameter. So to do that, we're going to type in person dot I think it was setName, and then we put the brackets in, a semicolon, and in the brackets we're going to put these double quotes in, and then we type in the name we want to give the person. So for example, these, because why not? Or these nuts, why not? It's another thing we can use. So this will set our variable name according to what we type into these brackets right here, into these double quotes. So now we want to print out the thing. So instead of using should I type this out? Print ln. So instead of like using the name variable, which we do not have in our main section of code here, we're going to use the gather method, or the get name right here. To use it, we once again have to type in person dot get name, and we have to put in those regular brackets in. So what we've done here, this also references a bit of object-oriented programming. So this is basically a continuation of that last video. So pretty much what we have here is we have created a instance of our class, my class, which is called person, and it's a new instance of our class. We are now using the setter, or the set method of our class, to set the name of the person. The person is currently called these nuts, because I couldn't think of anything else. And what we're doing here in the next line is we're printing out these nuts, but we're using the get method. So pretty much we're using this section of code right here to get the name that we've just set using this method. So now if I decide to compile this, takes a little while. Okay, there we go, it's compiled. So pretty much the only thing left for us is just run it, and you should see that it prints out just like we expected, these nuts thing. So you might be wondering, why do we want to actually use encapsulation in this way? So the main reason why you want to use an encapsulation is it gives you a bit of a better amount of control, which makes it far more usable than you might think at first. You can make methods that are just read-only, so people cannot write inside of your dataset, for example, which is really useful if you're trying to make something bigger and you don't want any other function to accidentally override something, which is pretty much the last thing you would want to do. So this is encapsulation covered. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to comment these out line by line, because I'm a pain in the butt when it comes to this. And we're going to cover the next section, which is inheritance, I believe. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually add here another section. We'll say So it is encapsulation start. Class section start, and we're going to copy this, and we're going to section, we're going to say and we're going to do the same thing here, so we can easily separate these things. Encapsulation main section start and encapsulation main section end, so you guys can understand which part correlates to which. So if you want to use it, you just have to uncomment these in betweens, and it will work just fine. I figured it might be a bit better to like understand with it being like this separated. So yeah, that's encapsulation covered. Next thing we're going to cover is inheritance. So let me first copy this so we can like create another section. So it will be inheritance section start, and we're going to copy this and do it like this, and then section end. I'm going to do the same thing here, but just copy this. I'm going to copy the inheritance part, so you guys can like understand which part correlates with which, so that we do not cause any trouble for ourselves. And so it like makes a bit more sense to you guys to understand which section is which. So yeah, I'm going to like make space in here so we can start working. So yeah, so what does someone actually do? Oh, whoops, wrong space, there we go. So as an example, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to actually work with cars here a little bit. So how are we going to do this? As an example, I'm going to create an attribute. The attribute I'm going to create, and this is like really important to understand, is that inheritance works in a different way. The inheritance can be separated into two categories, essentially. We have a subclass, which is the child, which is a class that inherits from another class, and then we have a superclass, otherwise known as the parent. And the parent pretty much is a class that it's being inherited from. So that means that our child class inherits from the parent class. Pretty much to inherit from a different class, we have to use the extends keyword. That's why Java is a bit complicated. In C# it's easy, you just use the, the double dots thing. I call it double dots because I don't know how the right word is. But yeah, pretty much if you want to inherit something from a different class, or from a upper class or superclass if you want, or a parent class, you have to use the extends keyword. So pretty much what I'm going to do is I'm going to define, again we're going to stick with vehicles here like we did in the last video a little bit. So I'm going to create a protected attribute. The reason why it's protected is it's a, how should I say it? Pretty much we set a brand attribute, which is the brand of the car, which we set as protected, so it can be accessed. You might think, well, why not just use the private one? The problem with using a private one is we won't be able to access it. That's why it's important to understand the difference between protected and private. The protected one basically means that it's a access modifier, which lets us access to modify just one bit. If we were to use private, we wouldn't be able to change anything. We won't even be able to access it, which is what we want. We're inheriting. We want to be able to access it. So to do so, we're going to create a protected string called brand. So type in protected string. We're going to call it brand because it's a car brand. And I'm going to use Mustang, for example. Or wait, that's a brand. So what's the brand of Mustang? Mustang is the model. So I think it was Ford. So let's do Ford. So let's do Ford like that. And that's our vehicle attribute essentially. And we want to give it a actually, hold on, let me see. I actually have to create a separate class for this. Okay, sounds like fun. Okay, so let me create a separate class for this. I did not think of that, so let me just take this, all of this code, and we're going to create a separate class. I think we're going to. Actually, we do not have to do it like this, or do we? I mean, I could try and you know what, no. So let's create a different class for this. I don't want anything to be considered wrong and stuff and be called out on my idiocy. So I'm going to call we're going to create a class right here. We're going to call it vehicle. Yeah, vehicle. That sounds about right. And I'm going to put these brackets here, therefore separating it. Perfect. And which means I'm going to copy this and move it right before this one starts, so you guys know which section belongs to which, so that there's no confusion. And what we're going to do here is we're going to now create a method for our class. So for example, we want to create a public void, and it will be let's say honk, because why not, because I don't know what else to do. And inside of here we're going to have what we want it to do when we're going to use it. So what should we do? Yeah, let's do system out, whoops, print line. I want to do, let's do honkers. It's like almost like poggers, but it's honkers. Hopefully I didn't trigger anyone. So pretty much what we have is we have a attribute called brand, and we have a method for our vehicle. This is a vehicle attribute, so it's okay this way. Now I'm not gonna use anything of this class right here. I'm going to create a separate class for this. Or at least I think I want to do that. No, I don't. So I'm going to create here a private string. Actually, I have to put the private string up here, don't I? Since it's the public static void, yes, I have to, because it otherwise wouldn't make sense. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy this, inheritance, there, and we're going to inheritance, we're going to call it attribute. There we go, inheritance attribute. I'm going to paste it in. That's start and that's end. And we're going to basically create a private string, and it will be called model name, because we want the name of the car or the model essentially, and will be in double quotes since it's a string. And we're going to give it Mustang, for example. It kind of ties in with the last one we've had. So with that created, we actually have to do one more thing. I'm actually going to take this out of here, and I'm going to put it down here, and I'm going to comment this out. Again, those who are following the video will understand why I'm doing this. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to understand any of this. So I'm going to comment these lit up sections, because I do not need those to be used in my code. So to So to prevent any sort of errors from happening, I'm going to comment it out like this. So everything that we're not using is currently commented out. We want it to inherit stuff from us. So I'm going to copy this section of code and we're going to move it up here. I'm going to move it down here into this section, and here we're going to start writing our class, which will extend, it will like take this inheritance thing that we want from it. So so we're going to create a class that will inherit basically the things we need from it. So to do that, we type, let's create a class. It will be called car. And since we want it to inherit from our vehicle class, we just type in extends and then the name, so vehicle. We put in these regular brackets in, and inside of here, we're going to take this part right here. I'm sorry about that. There we go. So that's the inheritance attribute, the attribute from our inheritance that we've set. And now we're going to have to create a like static void thing. So you might recognize, I'm just gonna copy this part right here, because we're going to have to use it. Because if you create another class and you want to use it as a extension of it, you have to define this. Otherwise it won't work. And here is where all the other magic will happen. Now we're working only with the car class itself. So to do so, I'm going to actually, you know what? Let me move this down here. I know I'm moving it all around the place, but you know. Oh wait, I'm a dunce. Where's the end? There it is. There we go. And we're going to move it all the way down here so that it's separated nicely, so you guys know what is going on. So here, as I said, we're going to have the public void main, and it's separate from all these other things. Again, you can uncomment as you need. Just make sure to not come at me if that something doesn't work. I'm trying my best to explain everything. So when it comes to inheritance, you basically need to do the things we were used to doing. We have to create a object. So to do that, we're going to call the car class. And let's call it my car. Again, create a new one, new car, and like that. And then we're going to call the method which we called honk, which is up here. So to do that, it's really simple. You just type in my car.honk, put in those regular brackets in, and close it out with a semicolon. And all we want to do now is want to display the attributes like the model name and the brand name. So what I'm going to do is we're going to use the system.out.println, and we're going to use the mycar like class. And we're going to take the brand, and then we're going to separate them with a space, and then we're going to do my car once again, but this time we're going to get the model name because we want to get the name of the model of the car. So what should happen now, ignoring all of the section at the beginning, is we have our inheritance section created. And all that was involved with this was we've created a separate class called vehicle. It has a protected string called brand, which has the value of 4, and it has a function associated with it, a method essentially, which is called honk, and it will print out honkers once it's called. And then we are in this section, which is a class called car, and it inherits from our vehicle class, which is up here. And basically what we're doing is we are creating a private string called model name, which is Mustang. And now watch what happens. This is really cool. The reason why we're able to use the mycar.brand is because we're inheriting from our vehicle class. This brand variable is only specific for the vehicle class. And since we're inheriting from it, we are able to use it. So now if I decide to compile this code and run it, it says it cannot find method in class vehicle. That's fine. I don't know why it's complaining. It doesn't have a main string. Does it really have to have that inside of it? Don't tell me it has to. Main string method in class, it doesn't have one. Well, that's no biggie. We can in fact fix this just by, you know, just by creating it down below, and nobody will complain. Kind of like that, and it should hopefully work. Okay, if I decide to run it, nothing happens. Wanna know why? We have done it, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't do nothing at all. Because, you know, it doesn't know what to do with it. Let's try and put it inside of this public void main and see what it does. If we run it, as you can see, it says honkers, but nothing gets printed out. Which is bad, because it was supposed to print out the name of the car, so I must be missing something. Maybe, since it's a... what's going on here? I'm just looking at like if I missed something, or if there's something I just like completely missed. So I'm looking at like, you know, the code, trying to figure out what's wrong with this. So it does the honkers thing now, but I don't understand why it needed to do it like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy basically sections of this and figure out what's wrong, because it should like be able to like do it without the void thing here, but it's not able to, which I don't understand. Maybe because it's like written this way, it doesn't like, you know what to do with it, which is really weird, because you should be able to do so. I got rid of that now, but I still don't get why it's like not working like it should normally. So I'm just looking at things I might have like missed or something. Doesn't seem that I did, which is kind of bothering me. So I'm just like, you know, looking at the code, like trying to figure out what's wrong with this. And we do that, and then it does like nothing, which is what it shouldn't do. It should just use the honk, which is right here, but it doesn't. It just throws an error. It's like it has a tantrum, you know. Maybe we put in the public things inside of it. I don't think it's gonna let me though. I think it has to be public static though, you know, to be able to use it. Let's see what it does now by putting in the public static things. Uh-oh, it doesn't know. So car is public, so it should be a file name car.java. Interesting. And interesting. So it doesn't like, I guess, like the static thing. So if I get rid of the static thing inside of here as well, it should possibly work. It doesn't, so it's public, should be declared in the file called car.java, which it is not in fact. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that. So I'm going to leave it just as a class, regular class. Here as well, just a regular class that extends from it. But I still don't understand why it... Okay, if I decide to compile this and run it now, it throws the same thing. It cannot find the main string method in class vehicle, which it has it, or it doesn't. But why does it have to? That's what I never understood about these things. It's defined, but doesn't want to use it at all. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy this section of the code and move it down here and see what it does. So I'm going to compile this. It compiles just fine if I run it. Now it works. So here's an important thing. You just watch me brainstorm this stuff and we're not even halfway done. The reason why I showed you this is that it's important to understand what my thought process is in these videos. So the reason why it didn't want to work is it goes line by line, as I mentioned, and it didn't find, you know, the thing that it had to find. You know, it wanted the main string thing, right? So I figured, what if I move this class vehicle below? This is also a common thing you will see if someone works primarily in Java instead of C#, that they will move the class below the code to ensure that it works pretty much every single time. This is something really important to remember about Java, that it makes some things like unnecessarily complicated. Like, sure, it makes the code look cleaner, but like still, I wouldn't recommend just putting a class below it. So essentially we have now created multiple classes, and we have a master class essentially, which is inheriting from our main class right here. So with that done, what else is that to talk about? There's also the final keyword. Basically what it does, it makes it so you cannot change any of the attributes. However, if you decide to use it on the vehicle class, it will error out because it, you know, like it will like throw an error. If you don't want to inherit anything from this class, just put the final keyword here below it, like before it. Put it before it and we'll say nope. It won't work because the final vehicle is like, you know, it cannot inherit from a final class. That's basically how it works. So that's pretty much like inheritance. It takes a little while to explain everything. Oh boy, this one will be fun. So the reason why I wanted to cover this first instead of anything else is we are going to now work on another section of code. This time, by knowing how to write this, we're going to hopefully write this properly. We're going to work with polymorphism. What polymorphism is that it can have many forms. Basically, it's like inheritance, but we are using those methods that we've created in the inheritance section to pretty much perform a single action in a plethora of different ways. So we can have one section defined, like one bit of the code defined, but we basically have to be able to modify some sort of data like on the fly, or change something according to a different animal species, for example. So the example I have prepared is we are going to create some sort of a animal, you know, differentiating program. Let me first like uncomment all the unnecessary stuff and separate all the like necessary and unnecessary things. Let me just comment this out. Also, if you haven't noticed, this file will be really large by the end of all of this, and we're already wasting a lot of time. And that's because I am trying to explain everything, and hopefully it helps some of you, because I'm really putting a lot of time and effort. So first I want to start by creating my, you know, before I create all my classes, I want to create like a main class, which will have, you know, a like all those things like inside of it that we're going to use. So first up, we're going to create a class which has the public static void in it, because Java is looking line by line, and if it doesn't see it in the first class, it's gonna scream at you like, hey, what are you doing? So yeah, so to do that, we're going to create a class which will be called my main. Actually, let's call it like a main class. Why not? Because it will be the main one which will house the main meats of our class. And I'm going to do a certain thing. I'm going to copy this, the public static void main string args thing, because it's used in pretty much every single bit of code. You might have noticed that instead of using different like files, I'm actually using the same file but with different like sections, and that's because it makes it easier for me to share and hopefully is enough for all of you to understand. So we have created a public, so we have our main class defined now. So what we have to do is we have to create those other classes which we are going to use. I already have an example prepared, so I'm going to just copy it over and explain what everything does. And yoink. So you might have noticed I pasted a little bit of code in here, but that's fine. I just took the example I had prepared for you guys. So pretty much what we're doing is we have a, let me explain this. So we have a class, like a master class called animal, and it has a public void called animal sound. And the animal sound is, it will do like the animal makes a sound. That's what it will do if we are going to, you know, let me have a look. That's what it will print out if we decide to use the animal object. However, we have two other classes here. These two classes have also the same void called animal sound, but there's a difference. They have different lines. So pretty much is what we're doing is we're changing it depending on what animal we are working with. A useful thing about inheritance and polymorphism is, and also one of the reasons why we use it, is that we can pretty much reuse attributes and methods from existing classes if we want to create a new class. So this makes it actually easier for us to work with, believe it or not. I'm actually going to copy this and reuse the title link so you guys can easily differentiate. So instead of inheritance, it's polymorphism, I think. Is it polymorphism? Yeah, polymorphism. I have to look at my notes because I like, you know, okay, this is the end, so I'm going to copy it and change this to start, and we're going to move down here and then to end. There we go. So we have separated it successfully. So now, since you had a look at the class, pretty much what we have is we have a animal sound method, which will be inherited with each and every one of these. Hence why we can use the same name, but the difference will be that each and every animal has a different for each and every like self. You know, we could also like create like age and such and say the age of the animal if you wanted to, it's okay. But for the sake of simplicity and that everyone pretty much, you know, understands everything, is that we have like, you know, we have these pig and dog classes, or, you know, that are inheriting the method animal sound, and it's used in both of them. Hence why we're using polymorphism. Polymorphism is essentially taking something from an existing class and modifying it to your own benefit, essentially. It's kind of like inheritance, but you get to modify things. You know, you can pretty much perform the same action, but with different classes, therefore changing, for example, what they say and such, without having to be worried that it won't work. So now that we've defined all of this, we want to be able to, you know, use them. So to use them, we go back to our main class section here. And what do? We type in animal, and this is a really cool thing. We type in animal since it's a like a main class, and let's call it my animal. And it will use it as a object from the it will pretty much create a new animal object with this. So new animal, regular brackets, and that's our animal object defined. Now I'm going to type in animal once again, but this time let's call it my pig, because you know when I use the pig now, and we're going to create new, and this time type in pig, because we want to create a pig object. Look at the difference. Instead of using pig as a separate class, we're using the animal class as the main class, but we're using the class that has inherited the stuff, which was our pig class, and we're just creating the pig object from our main class, which is animal. See, this is animal, and pig inherits from animal, hence why we can use it here. The same thing will go with dog, so we do the same thing here. So animal, my dog equals new dog. But this will compile, but it will do nothing. Like I can even show you, it will do absolutely nothing. If I compile it and run it, it will do absolutely nothing. Like we have defined it, but no text is showing. That's because you haven't called the functions yet. To do that, we type in my animal dot, and then the function is called animal sound. You can see it down here. So we type in animal, as you can see it says sound already as a part of IntelliSense, and we can copy this and change it for each and every one of our classes here. So let's change this to pig and change this to dog to separate all of this. So now you can see, and this is important to remember, it will print out based on which class it is. So what we should see, it should say the animal makes a sound, the pig says wee, the dog says bow bow. So you should be and you should be able to see that. So if I compile this, see no errors, and if I run this now, the difference will be with the output. You can see it outputs successfully to what we wanted it to do. And that's pretty much what polymorphism is. However, there's still one thing important, hence why I'm covering all of this in one video in this one stretch, and pretty much in the last video in this series, and that's abstraction. A main difference and a main feature of abstraction is essentially to be able to basically process, like, it should be able to like hide certain details or showing only essential information to the user, which is really important if you don't want to overload the user with unneeded things, you know. There are actually two differences when using the abstract keyword. There are abstract classes and abstract methods. When it's used with an abstraction class, the difference is that it cannot be used to create objects from it. It's a class that you can access it. You need to access it in order to inherit from another class, which is the difference. However, with an abstraction method, you should be able to use basically, you know, use it in a subclass. It's like provided by a subclass, and you should be able to use it. It's used only in a abstract class, which is what I explained earlier, like a few seconds ago. It can be used only then and there, otherwise it cannot be used. However, one thing to remember, an abstract class can have both abstract and regular methods. The difference between abstract and regular methods, let me actually comment all of this out if I start writing and risking that I break everything. I know there is a keyboard shortcut for this, but I don't remember it because I am a bit of a lazy bastard myself, so I'm gonna just, you know, comment all of this stuff out. You guys should be able to follow along anyway. Let me just move this down so I know and can see everything. I'm going to comment this out. We're already at like more than 69 lines of code today, which is really good. It really shows that if you guys stick to it, you should be able to like understand all of this stuff really easily later down the line. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to cover abstraction next. So I'm going to copy this section so we can separate it into another section itself. And we're going to change this to abstraction. Just so, you know, it like changes based on what we need to have. And we're going to change this to end so we know it ends of the section. So, what can we do? We can, in fact, let me show you actually an abstraction class that can have both a regular method and an abstraction method. or a abstract method. So you might have seen me use it before in like C# and such, and it works in pretty much the same way. What you do is you pretty much have to create an abstract class first. It's actually really easy to do. I'll just have a look. So to show you that we can in fact use both regular methods and an abstract method, I'm going to reuse the animal class idea I had like right before this. I in fact have to move it down a little because it will be like a second like class, you know, to like make everything like simple and make it work normally. So I'm going to copy actually this section of code with the main class thing, but I'm gonna remove a bunch of the unneeded stuff from it. So for example, these commented lines, I'm just gonna get rid of these, and we can pretty much reuse this for our own advantage. So I'm just gonna look at my example. You know what? I'm gonna get rid of this fully. This has to be in the beginning anyway to make it compile normally. So trust me with this. So first we have to create a abstract class. So to show you how you can do this, it's actually really easy. All you have to do is type abstract. As you can see, it changes color. And we type in class, which is the thing we want to create. We want to create the animal class, as I mentioned before. And we're going to put in these squiggly brackets, and now we're going to create a abstraction method. This method, however, does not have a body, so the body is pretty much, let me first figure it out. I'll explain what the body is in a sec. So I'm going to create public abstract void. It will be animal sound once again. There we go, and we're going to create a regular method which will be sleep. So let's do public void sleep. It's a really simple example, so just bear with me on this one. Okay, there we go. So, and let's say system.out.print line, and we are going to print out 3 Z's to simulate that it's sleeping. So this is pretty much an example of a abstraction class which has both a abstract method, which is this, and a regular method. Now the difference should be pretty obvious right now. A abstract method uses the keyword abstract, but it also doesn't have a body. The body is this thing right here that I just highlighted. The body is essentially the block of code inside of a method. This is a method with a body, a regular method. However, this is a abstract method, so it doesn't have anything defined, at least as of now. Soon it will have something defined. I will show you that. Just bear with me, okay? We're going to create, I think, just one class, just to demonstrate that it does in fact work. So to do that, I'm going to create a class called pig, which will inherit from our abstract class called animal. It's a subclass essentially, or a child which inherits from its parents. So type in class, and let's say pig, and extends, because we want to inherit. Type in animal. And you want to do these things, and next you want to do is public void and animal sound, because that's what you want to change depending on the animal, just like in the example before, but with a abstract class. And here is where we actually provide the body with the animal sound. So you might have noticed that in this section where the main code resides for our main class, well, main class, our parent class, it doesn't have a body. Here in the inherited class is where you define the body of the same function. It's called the same way, animal sound, but here you define the body. Here you do not. You have to remember that. That's the difference. So now what we do is we type in, actually I'm going to copy the system print line thing because I don't want to type it out. And we're going to say, Let's actually copy it from the example again, this part. I don't want to rewrite it like a total barbarian. So the pig says wee wee, okay? Just bear with me, it's an example, it should work just like it should. So now, you might say, yeah, this should work. If I compile this, you can see no errors occur. If I run this, oops, nothing's happened. What's going on? Remember how I said again, we have to call these, we have to use these in our code? We're going to do that just now. So let's say we're gonna call the class pig again, and we're going to call it my pig, you know, for simplicity. And we're going to create a new pig. Okay. And that's pretty much it. So we've created a pig object right now, and we're going to type in my pig dot, and we do animal sound. And remember, the animal sound is inside of the extended of the inherited part. However, that does not mean we cannot use the sleep function here that we've created. Let me show you what happens if we call the sleep function from the animal class. My pig dot sleep. So what we've done here is we are using currently a method that's specific only for our class we inherited from our parent class called animal. So here we have the sleep function, which is specific only for this abstract class. However, since we're inheriting from the animal class, we can in fact use it with our pig class. The pig class is an extension, or it inherits from our animal class. So now, since we've done all of this, that's pretty much all you need to do. And it's saved, so all we have to do is just compile the code and run it, and there you go. As you can see, it works. We have done it. We have finally understood everything we need about classes in Java. We pretty much went over all the things that you will need. These are just the basics, bear that in mind. I covered like modifiers, inheritance, polymorphism, and abstraction, but there are a ton more things we could cover. However, I'm not gonna cover those. The reason is this is just the basics. This is just to get you started. I create this series and go through the trouble to show you also possible errors that might occur with the code and show you how you can solve it. This is, however, only one of those many videos on my YouTube channel, which I make pretty much I make them like when I find time. However, with my release schedule, I actually make time for myself to release these videos for you guys. They are released on a weekly basis. Depending on if I have time or have another video planned, I might release a different type of video the next week if I don't have time, or if I haven't recorded anything for the tutorial section of my YouTube videos. As I mentioned, I still have quite a few like things prepared that I want to cover. I think JavaScript will be a good place to go next, because it's an important part when you want to design a web page. So since I already did an HTML tutorial, which was like only what, four videos where I covered HTML and CSS, I think it's important to learn like all those things that you need to learn. There isn't much in CSS. Like there's like a lot of stuff you can do, like 2D transformations, buttons, multiple columns. I haven't actually used multiple columns ever, so it will be interesting for me to learn that. But there's a bunch of things there's to learn, so there are a lot of videos coming. Just you have to wait it out. Again, if there's something you did not understand or want to just learn something new, or there is a language you want me to show you or work with, just let me know. I would be happy to do so. And on that note, I hope you guys are doing great, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.